Grab your coffee and join me, Nicoa, for a caffeinated conversation about life. I'll be talking to people who have chosen to walk their own paths and, just like me, are creating a life by design. I hope it will give you the inspiration you need to do exactly the same. Hey, Jay Ramsden, how are you this morning?
I am well, Nicoa. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. I've been following you for a while. I stalked you long enough to actually get you to be on the podcast. So,
well, there you go. Hell yeah, I'm happy to be here. I love jumping on people's shows. So
I saw you got your coffee. I got my coffee with Nicoa.
Coffee. Yeah, Believe in yourself.
Oh, awesome. I clearly do. Mine simply says Coffee with Nicoa.
There you go.
Yes, believe in myself. And right. I don't think I could do it if I didn't believe in myself, right? And
exactly.
And you're a fellow podcaster. I know you're not doing it right this second. You're on a bit of a sabbatical for that. But I loved that you named your podcast Intentionally Curious.
I did.
Where'd you get that from?
Where did I get that? Because at that moment in time, that's what I was doing with my life, is like trying to live intentionally curious and trying to help people with that.
Yeah.
And actually, when I launched that podcast back on New Year's Eve of 2020. Because What else do you do during the pandemic but launch a podcast, right? And at that time, it was called Positivity on Fire. Yeah, I was
looking that too.
I was looking for positivity in the world and trying to give some out. And what's interesting, people podcast and write and blog and do stuff about their own journeys. The 80 some episodes I did between December of 2020 and probably October of 23 or 22. I can't remember when I stopped now.
23. I saw your last episode. Yeah, I listened.
Yeah. And it's my journey of like, I was having some changes in my life and I was looking for positivity in the pandemic. And then I started like focusing on coaching, and I wanted to help people be intentionally curious about their life. And now I'm I'm pretty close to relaunching it, and still working on the name, but I'm workshopping that a little bit, but I think I'm landing on This Empty Nest Life.
Oh, well, that would align with what you're focused on now and why I brought you. Nice segue. Everybody, please welcome Jay Ramsden. He is a graduate of the Coaching and Positive Psychology Institute, member of ICF, International Coach Federation. I used to be very active in that organization as well. Certified personal and executive coach. So we're just going to sit here and talk about all the things that we both love.
I love that.
The focus, though, for his clients and those who follow him on social media is really about being an empty nester and falling in love with their lives once the kids, and I love this phrase, are grown and flown. Right? That's perfect. That is just so perfect. I did try to go read the feature that they did on you in the Wall Street Journal, but I didn't have a subscription.
Oh, yeah. There's on my website, I think there's a free link.
Oh, okay.
It's a public link that they give to people so they want you to promote it and send it out.
Yeah, for sure. And remind me your website again.
It's jasonramsden.com.
Okay.
I've been trying to secure theemptynest.com, but somebody has it and they're trying to sell it for a lot of money, and I'm like, I'm not having that.
Well, I have a suggestion for you.
Yes.
So I have two websites. One is really coffeewithnicoa.com, and it's kind of the blog and the old interviews and et cetera, et cetera. And then I have a coaching dedicated, like a referral site, and it is nicoa.coach. So .coach is available.
Well, there you go. Theemptynest.coach. I have to see if it works. Yeah.
Yeah. And it works fine for me for the past year, 2 years, and nobody seems to be like concerned about the .coach part. And it works.
They're not.
So there you go.
Shows up in the rankings and all that kind of stuff. And I'd actually have it forward to my jasonramsden.com one, only because I've had it forever. And when you search my name, either Jason Ramsden or Empty Nest Coach or Jay Ramsden, I show up.
You show up. Same with me. Yeah. I got everything redirected behind the scenes, and I just love that you niched here. And that's what I want to talk about today, and the curiosity and falling in love with our lives. I mean, really, that's why I launched this podcast is people are living great lives and loving what they do every day, and they don't dread it. They're not like, oh my God, countdown to the next vacation. I mean, we all like a good vacation, but those people that I really are trying to highlight are ones who figured out, how can I actually be happy where I am? And it sounds like you had some history probably that kind of forced you into this niche. Tell me about why empty nesting. What happened in your life?
What happened?
Yeah.
So people ask me that all the time. It's like, why did you, or how did you end up coaching people who are empty nesters? And like, how did that niche come to be? And I always say, like, I didn't find it; it found me. When I had worked in education for a long time, and folks thought I was gonna. When I said I was going to be a coach, I went into thinking I was going to be a leadership coach. And while I was passionate about it at the time, I wasn't passionate about it.
Right.
Right. I wasn't like, I could have done it, but
it's something you could do. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right. And so I did that for about 6 months, and it wasn't lighting me up. And then I'd said, all right, I'll be a general life coach because I don't have a niche. And I started to attract people, but I had trouble building content and actually what am I going to talk about, like this general life coach? And then I realized the people I were attracting were the exact same people who were in the same spot in life as me, plus or minus 5 years.
Yeah.
I just don't coach empty nesters. It's who I market to, but I coach people who have kids in high school and they want to be coached on parenting.
Right.
And then I coach people whose kids are way gone out of the house, right? They're not just at that precipice of being an empty nester. Their kids they have on their own families. And so I have this spectrum of people from about like 40 to 60, 65. Actually, I just signed a client yesterday who's 75.
Yeah. So, awesome.
Yeah. So I was just attracting those folks. I'm like, oh, there's something here. And the truth is, the way that I ended up being the empty nest coach on social and focusing on all that is like, I read an article about how the TikTok algorithm wants your handle and your name and your description all to match to be able to help people find you better. And that's how I ended up being the empty nest coach.
All right. Well, I know there's more to that story, though. That's the high level story. But
that's the high level story.
That's the high level story. You happen to be a father.
I am.
And you're an empty nest now?
Empty nest, yeah. Kids are 26 and 24, and they both live their lives and have adult apartments and all those good
they're
things.
grown. They're law-abiding citizens, as far as we know. And
exactly.
I've got 3. One still in college, but the other 2 are out with rent and jobs and paying their taxes. But I was listening to one of your TikTok posts, and you tell a very interesting story about some realizations that you had raising your son. And so I would love to hear a little bit about, your world as a parent and getting to that stage of empty nest. And I don't know, you can talk about lessons learned. You said that you were talking about your son preparing the path instead of preparing the kid.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a great saying that goes, prepare the child for the path, not the path for the child. And having worked in education for a long time, like I really believe that. It was something that sat on my desk. I think it's back here someplace on my counter somewhere. And it's just something that I believe in deeply is like so many parents want to prepare their kids to be on a path as opposed to preparing them for the things that can come up on the path. And that is something that I've kind of like lived by for a long time. Doesn't mean we don't slip into trying to push the kids in a certain way or a certain direction. But it reminded me like a story I haven't told yet. Well, I tell my clients this often though, but is like when my son was about 5 or something, I was frustrated with something. Who knows? He wasn't eating his dinner or he wasn't cleaning up. So, we get frustrated with our kids. And he said to me, he was 5. He said to me, well, Dad, when the volume in your voice goes up, the volume in my ears goes down.
Wow.
Right.
At 5.
Right? At 5. And I was like, okay. And I tucked that in and I didn't pay attention to it. But the story you were talking about, the video was high school. And I was doing what my father did with me, which was kind of like pushing in a certain direction. You got to get your act together. You got to focus. You got to study more. You got to get your grades up. You got to blah, 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 blah. And I was pushing and it wasn't going well, but something clicked in my head and I remembered that from when he was 5 and was like, oh yeah, this is not working. This is not the right way. So I think he was a sophomore in high school and I was not happy with what his grades were or how he was attacking his homework or all the things parents worry about. And I just kind of eased back a little bit and he struggled. Of course he struggled. Right. But preparing him for the path, I've taught him things. We taught both kids things. We modeled the way that we wanted them to live their lives. And he struggled a little bit junior year. He found his way senior year. And then he blossomed in college. He went to the right place for him. And it just was kind of amazing to watch him go. And rather than like butting heads and ruining a relationship, it helped broaden the relationship to be actually step back from.
How hard was that for you, Jay? I mean, think about that. I can imagine. I mean, as a parent, I think that there's two types of parents. You know, that earlier generation that was really the helicopter parent, or after, I don't know. I was more of the snowplow parent. Like, oh, you need a summer internship? Well, here's 14 people. I can draft an email for them right now, and you could just sign it and send it. And they're just like, Mom, stop.
Right.
We want to make sure, and we want to help, and we want to make it better for them than it was for us. And, you know, how did you, I mean, sure, you had the aha moment, and I don't know, maybe your wife told you to chill out. I don't know. What was it that really, what was the conversation with you?
The conversation with myself was, so my wife and I at the time were both in education, and she still is, and our daughter happened to go into that. And I saw a lot of that same stuff living out with parents in the community, with their kids, kids who were my advisees and that sort of thing. Is like, the more we, like, they say, okay, well, you create diamonds by applying pressure, but that's not true with the human being. Right. It's just not the same.
Nope.
And there may be some people out there who disagree with that philosophy. But what I talk about a lot now is kind of informed about that from that journey, was that at some point in our adult parenting lives, we move from caring for our kids, right? Literally making sure that they're fed and clothed and taken care of and safe, to supporting them, right? And sometimes it takes a long time for parents to know when that's the right transition for them. But ideally, that happens in high school.
Yeah. And it's hard because we think that caring is the same as carrying. And I'm always like, carrying is not caring. So you can support, and that's caring. Right. But if you're carrying them the whole time and worrying all the time, and, I had a friend say, I don't know, my son wants to go to Japan, blah, blah, blah. And he wants to go visit his brother who's already over there, but I don't know if he can do it by himself. I said to my friend, my son's been to Japan 3 times by himself. I said, which part about they can do it? They have more resources available to them now. She's like, I'm just so worried that he's not going to be okay. I said, it is safer now than ever to travel the world. And she let him go, but she was like, it makes me feel like I'm not mothering if I don't spin this story of worry and anxiety that I have carried my whole life with my children. And I said, that's the opportunity for you to turn all of that worry and care back towards yourself, and then trust them, like kick them out of the nest, push them. I know I'm talking to the choir here, but
yeah, absolutely. It is. So that comes up a lot with folks that I work with too, is like they're so focused on worrying about something that hasn't even happened yet. So like, all right, well, let's play that out. Like, what's the worst case scenario that could happen? Okay. If that doesn't happen, will that feel better to you than not? Right. And what is that? Like, what could you be doing in terms of spending your time if you weren't worrying?
Right. And
where else would you invest that time?
And what does your child need and want? Have you asked them? I mean, that's typically, we make a lot of assumptions as parents that they need us to answer the question or plow the path. I find it really interesting. It's tough at those last high school years. I mean, I'm only 2 years out of that with my youngest, and those were the toughest. And we would fuss, and we were like mini me, looking at each other. And I realized we had to go through that in order for her to rationalize leaving and for me to want her out. I mean, empty nesting is something you should actually want. Do you get pushback on that from parents?
I do. Is like, they don't want, like, I have a lot of people say, I just miss it when everybody was in the house. And it's, you don't, I saw somebody one time post like a picture of like 1,000 shoes by the back door. And they're like, I miss these days. And I was like,
do you really?
Really? Because I bet in that moment you were fussing about the 1,000 shoes by the back door. What you miss is the energy in the house.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you missed. You missed the hubbub and the conversations and the laughter and the tears and whatever else was happening. Like you missed the community of family, especially, if you have a bigger family and if you're, have a partner or spouse, right? People like that whole community goes back to one of the 6 or 7 elements of human needs, which is like community and belonging and other components like that. That's what you miss. You don't miss them. You don't miss the mess.
Right. You miss being a part and connected to something. You're absolutely right. And you talk about the stages of empty nesting, right? Most people are afraid of that silence too. The house is so quiet. And if they haven't gotten out ahead of it in the past, either with their partner or by themselves as a parent, then they will find that very uncomfortable and depressing potentially. So talk to me a little bit about those stages. Your last one's out either in college or as you said once, the last apartment, like the final apartment move.
Right. That was for me. That was for me, definitely. It didn't hit me so much when my son went off to college, probably a little bit more when my daughter went off to college because, dads and daughters and moms and sons.
And she's the youngest, right?
She's youngest.
So that makes it really final.
Yeah. And that was 2018 and then 2020 came and they were right.
Oh, that's right. They had to rebound
so
back.
we had to rebound kids. So it wasn't until we moved them into their apartments a week apart. My son did an extra year of college. So they ended up being, and then he took a little bit of time to find a job. So they ended up being on the exact same schedule in terms of adulting. So within 1 week, we moved my daughter into her apartment a month before she graduated college so she could be ready to go. And then the very next weekend moved our son out. And so that's when it hit me. And then for me, it was just, I was always Mr. Logistics, taking care of everything, cleaning, cooking, laundry, grocery shopping, meals, where you need to be, where you need to go. Like that was my job.
Okay.
In the family. And
how'd you feel?
Stopped, yeah. I was like, what the heck happened? Like, who am I supposed to take care of now?
Right.
Like, who am I supposed to help get to where they need to be? And that was a big aha moment for me, I think. That's how I ended up being like, okay, there's something here with this whole empty nesting piece. People talk about it all the time. They talk about empty nesting and the empty nest syndrome. And, the answer for most people that you read, if you Google it, is like, find a hobby. Like, you don't replace parenting 24/7 by finding a hobby. That's not where you start.
How did you cope initially? What was the cost of that confusion and overwhelm in your world?
Well, the cost was we had just moved too. So my wife had taken on a job the year before, 2021. And so this is 2022, April of 2022. We had just moved to a brand new place.
So you didn't know anybody?
I didn't know anybody. I wasn't working in education. I had kind of quote unquote retired. I had just tried to figure out launching this business. And it was like a lot of just sitting and going, well, I guess I'll do the laundry or I'll clean the floor or I'll do what tasks can I do? And that's where it was like, okay, I've got to fix this.
Guess what, y'all? I published a book. Your Life by Design, a Coffee with Nicoa self-care coaching journal, is now available on Amazon. This interactive journal begins and ends with powerful queries, guiding you on a quest for the kind of life by design you don't need a vacation from. I've included an in-depth look at strategic self-care to empower you and hold you accountable to really getting to know your true self. It's time to prioritize you. Use the link in the show notes to buy yours today. And the emotions around not knowing what to do. I mean, this is really an identity crisis in many ways.
Perfect. I love that you said that, Nicoa, because that is exactly what happens. It is a crisis of identity. Is that we as parents, and some more than others, get so wrapped up in the identity of parent, not Nicoa or Jay as parent, but our role as parent becomes our self-identity. And when that leaves and when that changes, that's when we're like at a crisis point because we don't know who we are.
I think that was a big part of, and it sounds like you had a similar role that my first husband did. And he was a stay-at-home dad for the majority of my career. And when I quit my career to come home and be an executive coach, it threw him for a loop. And unfortunately, there's a lot of reasons why we ultimately didn't stay together. But I think that identity crisis for him and for me in partnership to that in our new opportunity was really a big piece of us breaking. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad we're talking about this because I don't want other people to break when things like that happen. If they have to come home from a job or they lose their job or someone's life outlook is different. Especially, he said to me at one time when I was back home working, he said, I really feel like the kids need you more now than they did when they were younger. I think they need you. They don't need me as much as they did. And I felt that realization for him and that pain in his voice about that. So how do we help parents not get to that breaking point when roles shift and change like that and kids grow up?
Yeah. So I always liken it to what I really do is help people with life transitions. It's hard to market life transitions. So empty nest, is an aha point for people and it raises a lot of questions, but so does every single life transition. Like if you think back to going from elementary school to middle school, that's a life transition, raised a lot of questions for you. Yeah. Same thing from going to middle to high school to college. And all along the way, we have these transitions, but we also have a vision for what it looks like, right? Oh. You see people go from lower school to like elementary school to middle school and middle school to high school.
You have role models, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Some people get married and have kids. You're like, okay, that's probably what I'm going to do or what I'm supposed to do. And some people go in the military, you see that. That's a role model. You know what to expect. You have a family, you raise your kids, but nobody's modeling what happens when the kids leave and you end up being empty nesters, either by yourself because things didn't work out or with a partner or spouse who you're no longer connected to in a really strong way because you've lived parallel lives in the same house. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I do is really help people with life transitions.
Well, let's talk about how to help them because at the end of the day, when I reflect, there was, one of the things we do really well in the corporate world, and I'm sure you did in the education world, which is you have, a vision, a strategy, you have values, you have expectations of behaviors. We don't do that at home. And it drives me insane. I actually give away a book. This guy, Dan Zadra, this book, 5, Where Do You Want to Be in 5 Years, asks all the same questions that I used to ask when I would merge companies and we'd have big acquisitions and, what matters most to us? What are our values? What's the mission, the vision, and how will we hold ourselves accountable to that? I can remember coming home from that big corporate quit back in 2009 and saying, okay, I'm home now. What do you want to do for the next 55 years? And my husband was like, whoa, like you're in my space. So I don't know. Have you found that there's some things you wish you had done a little differently so you wouldn't have found yourself wandering the halls doing laundry spontaneously?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying before is like we see all these role models. We understand what the transition is supposed to look like. We know the emptiness is coming, but we don't prepare for it.
Right.
And I think what people could do now to prepare for it is really start to learn how you get a handle on your heart and your head. That's what I call it, is like getting a handle on your heart and your head around what's coming.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's just learning how we manage our thoughts and emotions. But when you say you got to learn to manage your thoughts and emotions, people are like, oh, I don't want to learn how to manage my thoughts and emotions. But when you say head and the heart, like those are two things are connected.
Yeah.
And that's how our brains work. Like you cannot have a thought without a feeling.
That's right.
And so get a handle on your heart and your head, like really examine what do you want life to look like? If you're feeling disconnected from your partner or spouse, start to incorporate things to make that better now before the kids go off. If you're struggling with what it means for the kids to go off, figure out what that means in your brain and your heart, right? Sit down, do thought downloads, journal.
Yes.
Right? And so I'm not a big fan of the word journal. Right?
Hey,
Because
now I
it brings
just
up
published a journal.
but I'm not a fan because it brings up so many connotations for
It
people.
does. People are
I'm
like,
just like,
wait, I don't want to sit down and reflect on my way of being. But I will tell you, journaling was probably the most profound tool. If you can write it down, it forces you to be in the moment and mindful of the thought and the
yes.
experience.
Yeah. And I believe in journaling.
I
I just
know.
don't like the term. So I just call it a brain dump. Just
Yeah.
spend time every day and get all the crappy thoughts out of your head onto paper.
You know, I would invite them to do that and a page of all the things they want to celebrate about what they've done and how much they should be really celebrating these rites of passage for their children. And we typically do, but we're so busy logistically. We're like, okay, did we arrange for the dinner for the graduation? Did you tell grandma? And how about Aunt so-and-so? And okay. And that weekend, and we've got it on the calendar, and then we move them into the apartment. And okay, did we get the U-Haul? I mean, you're so distracted by the doing that you're not dealing with the emotion that goes in parallel to that experience.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a long time. I didn't even know what was wrong with me after I'd sent Campbell, my youngest, off to college, got her in the dorm. And I remember being annoyed and frustrated and things were going. And then finally I was like, oh my God, I think I'm sad.
Yeah, so, it's like, what is this feeling?
Right. So talk about those three you talk about denial, grief, relief, when we're really getting them grown and flown. And
yeah. The 3 stages are like the overarching ones are grief, relief, and joy.
Oh, joy. I forgot joy. Yeah.
Grief, relief, and joy.
That's my point.
Denial fits in there too. I mean, I don't want to liken your kids going off to college for somebody passing in your life. But it is the stages of grief.
It is.
Right. And so you're grieving what was, right? You're grieving
the
story, right? You're grieving the life that was the energy, the family, the combination of things. And so, and I like to keep reminding people, like, yes, there are 3 stages: grief, relief, and joy. It's not linear.
No, it's not.
Some people jump right to joy because maybe they didn't enjoy raising their kids, or they had a different relationship with their kids.
Yeah.
And some people jump to relief. Some people stay in grief for a while and they get to relief, and then the kids come home for the summer or for holiday, and then they're right back to grief again.
Yeah.
It's not linear. That people hop around these stages. And for some, they stay stuck in the stages longer because they don't have the tools to kind of help move them forward.
And your work and my work is really helping them observe themselves so that they can really reflect on those emotions and how that's impacting them. And, you know, I think something that it just occurred to me to comment on is that as parents, although we've been doing our best to launch our kid, now we're reacting to it and having our response. And we're likely to forget that our kids are going through something very similar.
Exactly.
And we're not giving them enough time and space and credit for their emotions. They call up if they're crying for no particular reason that seems absolutely ridiculous to you. It's because they're going through, grief and,
Yep. Grief, relief, and joy. Yeah. It's the same for both. And I often tell people, like, it's a parallel journey, right? You're not going to college with your kids, right? I know some parents who want to move near their kids when they go out of college, but you're not actually going to college. But you and your kids are asking the same questions. What now? Who do I want to become? Like, what's my journey going to look like? It's literally parallel.
It really is. And it's so different. And we bring our story of when for those of us, not everybody goes off to college, but you and I both went off to college. And I can remember, we're carrying our experiences and in many ways giving them great value as to how we did it. Mm-hmm. And then we try to project them onto our kid when they complain about not having enough money. I have to tell a funny story. And my daughter and I were just talking about the same topic yesterday. And bless her heart, sweet daughter, if you are listening to this episode, which you probably are not, but she calls us up after we gave her a small budget, not much more than what my father gave me 30 years ago. I'm not kidding you, for living. And we said, look, everything else is taken care of. Here's your stipend. Mm-hmm. And she calls us up and says, this isn't enough money. And I was like, well, you're going to have to figure that out. And she said, I'm so upset with you. And I was like, why? She was like, you only bought like organic food and all the healthy stuff. I can't afford it. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. And then she said, pine nuts cost $11. I said,
Right? Yeah.
you're a college kid. Why are you buying pine nuts? I would like to make pesto. I said, good God, child, you are already going on 40. Please back it up. You are a college student.
It's okay to have Chick-fil-A. Go ahead.
It's okay.
Yeah.
We need you to be eating some ramen. I know it's not healthy, but so it's hard. And one last comment, and then I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this, because my son yesterday said he was watching this TikToks where kids right now, these 26, 27-year-olds, are posting pictures of their parents when they were 26 and 27. And so if you took a picture of me with my husband at the age of 26, 27, I would have been pregnant, standing in front of the house we bought, living our very American dream life. Now, Justice said they're then posting the picture of them texting their mom going, what is the Netflix password?
Password, yeah.
It's a new day, and that's hard for everybody. I don't know. Comments. What do you see?
I think it's cyclical. It happens, right? Our existence growing up was different than our parents' existing growing up, and so on and so on and so on. It's like, what do you want to do about it, though, as a parent?
That's right.
Like, do you want to accept that it's different, or do you want to try and force what you grew up with on your kids? And I think that's where we end up having some trouble. Like, people who are really struggling with their relationship with their kids is like they're trying to enforce everything they learned about life on their kids. And it's like, it's okay to teach them the things that you think are important, but you also have to realize they're going to learn things that they think are important.
That's right. And they're in a very, very different generation than we were, as is all generations, I'm sure. But, maybe instead of my reaction of, why don't you buy a jar of pesto, I could have said, that's really amazing that you're making pesto.
Yeah.
I wonder if you're maybe you need to get another job. See there, I would have done it again.
You got to figure out how to pay for those finances.
Exactly. Well, good luck with that. I guess you don't need a lot of paper towels or toilet paper. It'll be okay.
But how amazing is it, though, that she wanted to make pesto?
She is pretty damn amazing. They all are. And I am proud of them. I think so the layers. So as a coach, you and I both know this. So let's take that same example. So first thing she says is, this isn't enough money. So as a parent, and I am, right now I got 3 step kids and 3 regular kids and, 3 in college at the same time. So maybe her stipend isn't as much as it could have been. Mm-hmm. So then I have the trigger around money or worth or contribution or support that says, oh my God, I'm not giving her enough. She says you didn't give me enough. And then I feel guilty or something, right? So I go into the layers of shame, guilt, whatever. So then I project back onto her and go, well, you don't need to be buying pine nuts. But what I'm really feeling is, I wish she could buy pine nuts.
Exactly, right? Yeah.
So I just want to share, because if everybody listening can go into the layers, right, of what's really happening during these transitionary times, I think they'll find themselves in there, and they can have a little bit more compassion for themselves and for the kids.
Yep. Yeah. It goes back to what we were saying before, like getting a handle on what's in your head and your heart, or your heart and your head. Is like, when they say words, we have thoughts and feelings about it. And that's not just your kids. It's every single human being. Like, when things happen and when words are said, we have thoughts and feelings about them. And those words she said, it's not enough money. It's just neutral. She said words.
That's right. What? You're the only one who can make anything mean anything.
Exactly.
That's my favorite phrase. And what am I making this mean becomes probably my favorite question. Yep. And then I own it. And I create space between me and what's happening so that I can consciously, right, choose what am I going to do next. And anything that you want to share about some of your recent coaching work or clients that you feel like would be a good example to help those listening?
Yeah, I think it's like, when, let's say that you have kids in high school, right? So I have a couple clients who are that way. And it's like, okay, well, what do you want this time to be like? Right? Do you want to kind of enforce your will and kind of make it feel uncomfortable? It's only amount of time left that you have with them, or do you want to embrace their journey? Like, and then when they go to college, it's different. Right? It's a different relationship. It's a different time. Same thing. You want to try and force your will on the way that they're living their lives now? Or do you want to embrace their journey? And I think it's all about embracing their journey. I think that's what it comes down to. But a lot of parents struggle with that because their kids may not be making the decisions that they would want them to make or they made themselves. But I can guarantee we made decisions that our parents didn't think we should be making because it wasn't the decisions they would have made.
Right.
Right. And so it's like, at what point do you just stop, press pause? I always talk about the Staples commercial with the easy button as the example. Is like, you should like think of that like, okay, easy, like just use that as a big pause button and say, boom, pause. What do I want right now? Like, what's a better way to approach this? Is how I'm thinking about this actually serving me well in this moment? That's where I think the point is that I like to make with folks, just so they understand, like, is it really worth it?
Right. And I think you really said it. That pause button gives you the opportunity to go down the path of least resistance. Now, and I'm not talking about the path of avoidance.
No.
And a lot of parents just throw their hands up and they let the kid go in the room and they think, well, I assume they're applying for college. I assume they're writing the essay. That's a lot different than the I'm over your shoulder saying, let me help you write the essay. And, I put the stamp on the envelope for you so that, there's a balance there. The challenge is that I think you probably get pushback from clients and parents saying, yeah, but the facts are, here's the facts. The facts are, if they don't do it, then they don't get in. And actually what the parent's really afraid of is they will still be at home. or on the street.
Or if they don't do it and they don't get in, what does that mean about me as a parent?
Their own identity. You're talking about attachment. Right? I'm attached to the outcome. And, there's a phrase I've been playing with a lot lately that says, I am open to all and attached to none. And that is hard going. Because, first of all, I do try to help people get their blinders off. And if that's what you're trying to do, is take those blinders off. You think there's only one path, but there's multiple paths here. There's a lot of things can happen. And, I think the pandemic might have helped us, because I remember saying, as I watched these kids, online cheating, helping each other and like manipulating the system. And they were like, we're bored out of our effing minds. And I finally said, you know what? I'm going to give up my attachment to the school system. I'm just going to stop. Because so what? If you don't go to school, so what? Go do. I can now start counting. Many kids in this Gen Z world didn't go to college. They didn't get the degree. And we're about to see a breakdown, I think, in the system. So as a parent, notice how intensely you are holding on to this story that they have to get a college degree or they won't be successful or sustain their ability to be an adult in this world. That's just bullshit, and it's not true.
Yeah. Parents, I think lots of humans. I like to just call people humans. Because,
humans.
Is that want to classify things as right and wrong. But what if there is no right and wrong? Those are labels, right? Yes, there is right and wrong. Like obviously murder, right? We're not going to fall into that category, right?
Right. There are rules and
there's
laws and
there's laws, but there's no right and wrong.
Even
there's
murder
no right or wrong
is
way to
the
do
yang.
Something.
Right?
Yeah.
You got to see the extremes.
Yeah.
You're right.
There's no right and wrong
or
how to approach something, right? It's allowing the kids the ability to decide what they think is best for them, even if that isn't what you think is best for them.
And that is parenting. And if you can create, I would think that foundation. And this is a foundation in a relationship, anywhere, whether you're standing around the house alone or you're trying to help launch your kids, kick them out of the nest, is that foundation of safety. I can be loved by this person in my life. I can be loved by them. They are a safe person to go to. But the more you as a parent or a guide for another human being can say to them, I'm happy to share with you the way I did it, but I'm 100% confident that you can figure it out on your own.
Exactly.
We have to say that over and over again, even though there might be a part of us that is scared shitless that our kid's not going to be able to figure it out. That's the hard part.
Yeah. And on some level, we're like, well, I taught them everything everything they know. I taught them, but I didn't teach them everything I know. Well,
True.
That's okay too, right? That's okay too. They're gonna learn other things and other ways to do things, and sometimes they amaze us. Like we think, oh, how are you gonna learn about this? And they're like, well, blah blah blah. This is how I do it. And like, oh, okay, well that kind of makes sense. It's not how I would have approached it, but
right, it's not how I would have done it. Yeah. And I think when we can kind of tell, one of the things I really pride my 3 kids on, or I have pride in them, they've done this for themselves. But because I'm a coach and I've sometimes been the coach more than I was the parent, much to their dismay. And they will say to me now, hey, can I give you some feedback? Right. I love that. I'm like, and it makes me, I get anxious and nervous and embarrassed just like anybody would be like, oh God, what did I do wrong? Quote unquote. But with the ability for them to give me feedback and say, hey, I need more of this from you and less of this. Or I appreciate when you say that, or, you talk a lot about this on your social media, but it seems to me you're still working on it. And I'm like, that's why I'm talking about it. So
exactly.
We're all human beings. And if we can be transparent with these kids, I think they'll mirror back to us is my point. I'm sure you got some success stories you want to share of, parents really making a shift other than yours. Yours sounds like it was a real shift with your son at that stage in high school. But.
I think the biggest shift that I love to see in clients is just awareness. I think that's the biggest shift is like awareness of how they live their lives, how they interact with their kids, how they want to lead their lives now. Right. So that's the biggest, I think, joy I get in watching them have aha moments around, oh yeah, I am 100% in control of my life and I can always approach things differently if I choose to, right? It's always a choice.
It's always a choice.
Do this, or you can choose to do that, but the choice is yours.
The choice is yours. And that's the implication of that choice is the consequence is only going to be one for you to experience. So it's your choice. Exactly. It really is your choice. One of the things that's been tricky for me, and maybe you could advise, is I've been trying to be really hands off with my adult children. And I've started it's only really been 2 years of kind of empty nest. I've started saying things like, well, I'm thinking about doing this at Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter or whatever the holiday might be at your house. But I'll say it to my kid and then I'll say, but you don't, no pressure. I mean, you don't have to come home if you don't want to. And I've had one of my kids was like, do you not want me to come home? And I'm like, no. I mean, if you want to come home, but you don't have to come. So they're like really confused. I don't know. How do you help parents when they're parenting adult children? That's like a whole other topic, right?
It is a whole other topic. It really is. It's like, because there's still a power dynamic there. Right? There's still a power dynamic.
Tell me more. What do you think?
Still your kids. And oftentimes when you see stuff online, people are like, well, they're not kids. Well, they're my kid.
I know. You always be my baby.
Child.
I know.
It doesn't mean that and I'm saying they're children or they're kid-like, but to me, they're my kid. They're my child. That's how we describe them.
Yeah.
Right? But it's also when you talk about like, how do you parent adult kids? It's like, you don't.
That's a great answer. I know, but you don't.
You don't parent them. You support them.
Yeah.
Right. You may give them advice if they ask for it. Like, I think one of the biggest things is like, don't give unsolicited advice.
What? Jay, what are you talking about? I'm sorry. I hear you.
Right. Don't give unsolicited advice. Nobody wants unsolicited advice.
Fine. I have learned how to ask, would you like my advice or do you want to just tell me about it? So I'm better than I'm making fun of myself for.
I hear you. But I think one of the greatest things I heard, probably, I don't know, about 6 months, maybe it was a year ago, and I use it with my clients. I use it in my own life, particularly with my wife who has a big time job, but I haven't used it with the kids yet, but it works. Is like, do you want to be heard? Do you want to be helped, or do you want to be hugged?
Oh, yeah. Heard, helped, or hugged.
Hugged, yeah.
Exactly.
It's like, I need to know which hat to put on. I'm not going
Yeah.
to just jump in to be problem solver if that's not what you need right now.
You
Maybe
know,
you just want to throw up everything that's happening and you want to get it out. Fine.
that's right. You just want to vent.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I hate to have regrets, but I will tell you, as a Capricorn and a bit of a personality,
Mm-hmm.
I do wish that I had asked those questions to my kids more often. I hope people listening aren't berating themselves about their perception of getting it wrong, because we're human and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote get it right and wrong all the time. But I used to ask those questions to my employees. I was doing the big time job and I would
Right.
know exactly. They'd come in and it was genetically impossible for me to not already start solving their problem. They would be one sentence in and I'm thinking, okay, do I need to just tell them to call that guy now? Or so I would say, do you need my support? Do you need me to just listen? You know, do you want me to champion you in some way? Like, what is happening here? Because
what do
I
you need
can't,
from me?
yeah, I can't help myself but to go to a solutioning experience. And I think that's very relevant to parenting. We immediately try to solve it. I'll never forget the one time my kids were having an argument on the stairs, 2 of my 3. And I happened to come in the front door and I could hear them yelling at each other. And I walked in, shut the door, looked up the steps, and they both stopped and turned to me. And I thought, oh, they want me to solve this.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't know what you're arguing about, but I'm sure the 2 of you can figure it out. And I walked away and they were really pissed because they were so used to me saying, well, Justice, well, you know, Pippa, what? Well, who said what? Well, what happened? Well, you do this and you apologize. I mean, I was like always up in their business.
Right.
And that's really important. If we can extrapolate that, I'm sure you can figure that out and walk away. If you have to leave the house or go hide in the closet or go to the bathroom, you should do it, parents.
Yeah. One of the greatest lines that I ever heard was when we dropped our son off at college and the college presidents, you know how they do like the welcome address and et cetera. And they're like welcoming the parents. And the advice was, when your child calls up and has a problem that they're experiencing, the greatest gift that you can give them is to go, that's interesting. What are you going to do about it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Touche.
and it's so good to be like, okay, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. I mean, I ask my coaching clients that all the time. What are you going to do next? Well, what do you want to do now? Yeah, that's perfect. Oh my gosh. We clearly are from the same schools here,
That's right.
Jay.
Same school of thought. Love it. I love it.
I've enjoyed this conversation. Obviously, we could talk all day if we had time. Tell me what you're working on right now. Is there anything that you want to share with our audience that you're launching, or you want to send them anywhere?
Yeah, they can. I mean, if you Google Empty Nest Coach, I'm going to pop up for you for sure. They can go to my website, jasonramsden.com. But I feel like Google's the easiest way to do it. Or on social, I am the emptynest.coach. Easy to find, TikTok and Instagram. And I guess what I'm working on right now is just trying to help as many people as possible, whether they end up working with me one-on-one as a client or they just take all of my free stuff, which is like an email newsletter and a blog and my video content and written content, to help as many people as possible understand that they're not the only ones going through this transition. They're not a unicorn. There's lots of us that experience difficulty with life transitions, and empty nesting just happens to be a life transition that makes us press pause and go, ooh, what now?
What's next? And, you know, you're right. You do have a lot of great free content. I signed up for your newsletter and I started following you on TikTok as well. And I found you on Instagram. So you're out there. It's a lot of great stuff. I'll put it in the show notes. Before we wrap up, I'm just going to ask you one last question. What is it that you want to celebrate the most about your empty nest life by design?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I like celebrate most is I'm at a point in my life where I don't say no to things. That's awesome. That's what I want to celebrate. It's actually how I ended up climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Somebody asked me if I wanted to do it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, sure."
You know, I love that. I just told somebody this yesterday. So yesterday, I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine who was a client off and on for 15 years. He's a fantastic client of mine. And I'm actually, by the time this airs, people will likely know that I happen to be going through a divorce right now and of my second marriage.
Second one.
Yeah. And so that's tough, right? You know, you're like, whoa. That's not the story. That's a major. That wasn't the story we thought we were telling.
Right.
But it is what it is. And I was sharing with him, and I said, I just want you to know I'm going through this life transition. And he said, well, why aren't you down here in Costa Rica with my wife and me spending a week recovering from this transition? And I said, okay. So,
I'll be on the flight tomorrow.
I'll be on the flight. This was yesterday, Jay. I'll be on the flight next Thursday. So a week from yesterday, 1 week later. So I said that exactly. You know what? I'm just going to keep saying yes, because I know this transition is important for me. Mm-hmm. And I know that it means there's something that's expanding. And when things start popping into your universe, and even when your kid leaves and somebody says, why don't y'all, sell the house and go live in Portugal? I mean, don't say no quite yet. You never know. That might be exactly what your next phase of life is supposed to be like. And if you need help going through those transitions, make sure you get a coach, somebody like Jay or somebody like me.
There you go. I love it. Thank you, Nicoa. I appreciate being here today. It was such a great conversation. It
really has been. I appreciate you, and I will see you on social media. Thank you, Jay.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for a caffeinated conversation. Subscribe to Coffee with Nicoa for more stories from people living a life by design. You can also find inspiration on Instagram. Just follow Coffee with Nicoa. And check out our website, coffeewithnicoa.com. And that's Nicoa, Nicoa. We look forward to talking with you soon, and enjoy your coffee between now and then.